Alright guys, so I'm playing Devil May Cry 3 on PC. This is the vanilla port, the original port, and I'm using the style switcher. This is a mod that allows me to switch styles on the fly, as you can see on the HUD. And I gave the enemy infinite health, and this is just to demonstrate things a lot easier for you. And really the style switcher for this version of the game serves as a bunch of like new options that you can choose, and it's kind of like there by default in my directory. But it also exists for the HD collection on PC, and it doesn't just apply to DMC3, it also applies to other games. And it's been created by the same guy, a really great modder, Pentium. I'm just showing his stuff right now, but that's just like so for anybody who's asking about why I'm able to have the enemy live forever or have style switching. Anyways, this is DMC3 Ebony and Ivory. As a general rule, pretty much like, okay, it's for a summary of this weapon, and this applies to pretty much all the other games that I'm going to be talking about, with exception of a few moves. These guns are pretty weak. They're not made for efficiency. They're not made for damage. They have their uses, but they're definitely not made for that, for damage. These and DMC3 are the weakest stunning moves in the game, and they're probably the weakest damaging moves in the game as well. You can shoot them pretty quickly. That's probably not the best demonstration because I have shoot on L1 and I'm not the fastest trigger finger in the West, but that's kind of all I need really, and I don't really mash or shoot a lot with my playstyle. Some people make mashing with Ebony and Ivory look good, and it's probably this playstyle, but I prefer not to shoot multiple times in a row, more than once in a row. But that is something that doesn't even compensate for the weapon's sort of stun and damage. Like you can be shooting as fast as possible with this, right? But you wouldn't do as much as like a single sword slash. You sort of melee is the name of the game with these games. There's obviously some exceptions to that. Some weapons, some melee, gun weapons are actually pretty strong in certain contexts, and they can be overpowered, especially with the older Devil May Cry games, but not so much with the newer Devil May Cry games. So in general, you don't want to be using these for damage or stun. These weapons are not that strong. In fact, in this game, in this game, a single Ebony and Ivory shot became the unit of measurement for calculating stun values in this game. So, because of them being the weakest stunning moves in the game that actually deal stun, one shot is equivalent to 1 point of stun. And so, a sword slash is equivalent to 12 shots of Ebony and Ivory, so it's 12 points of stun. That's just to put that in perspective. It's like, yeah, these weapons are not that strong in terms of stun. And Rebellion isn't even like per hit. You know, usually it does 12 points of stun, but then you have Agni and Ruja, which deals per hit. Usually it deals 16. And then Beowulf deals 20 per hit on average. I think every hit of Beowulf does 20, but needless to say, these are pretty weak. And when they're blocking, especially, when they're blocking, you can see how much the stun they absorb and knockback they absorb and damage. So that actually gets converted into a decimal. In fact, people really early on did the math for stun values and pretty much got all the moves right. Like, let's say maybe 95% of the moves that they did calculations for were correct. And this was back in like 2008, 2009. I wasn't around there in that time, but those people like Beautiful Mo and other players did a really good job with the stun values. And it wasn't until several years later where we kind of had access to Cheat Engine and people using Cheat Engine, where we saw that, okay, there are some moves that they got wrong, but it was mostly because some moves got converted into decimals. Like Shotgun. Shotgun, up close, the original calculations were 26 points of stun and knockback, but they're actually at up close. They're actually a decimal. They're a little bit below 26, so they were off by just a few decimals. But for practical purposes, it doesn't really matter. And obviously, the changes based on range and whatnot. So that's kind of like a history with Ebony and Ivory, and it being used as a sort of unit of measurement for more advanced stuff. It might not seem like much for some of you guys, but believe me, it kind of changed the game. But yeah, these enemies would take 6 shots to stun. So that shows that they're not that efficient or that sort of useful. But you can definitely interrupt enemies with this gun, like these. I can't shoot that fast, but you can definitely interrupt them, and definitely not fast enough for that. But you're again better off with a sword slash. I'm gonna use my thumb for this just to demonstrate. Wow, I can't shoot that fast even with my thumb. Yeah, there's. Okay, so some of that is being rolled over after he stuns. Basically, every time the enemy stuns, it's sort of his invisible health bar for stun, let's say, gets reset to 0. So sometimes I'm shooting after he gets stunned, and that kind of goes over. It kind of, I'm not gonna explain that, but anyways, these guys don't get stunned as much as this. So in the air, let's say, let's launch these guys. They do stop a little bit. Right, and you can theoretically keep these enemies in the air forever, I assume, if you have fast enough fingers. Either way, you can keep them up in the air for a very long time. And this can be kind of useful sometimes. It would definitely be useful for jump cancel. We'll get to that later, but this is still just a single one. Doesn't keep the enemy in the air as much as a rave. And the reason for this is because, like, when you shoot, this is kind of more of a twitch. I'll call it a twitch. It twitches the enemy, and it sort of stops the enemy for a very small time. The same thing with Ebony and Ivory, when they're standing in the ground, or even when they're laying in the ground. It kind of slows down the movement. It might not seem like much, but it does actually slow down enemies that they're not reacting to it. And that's when they take a step backwards, that when they are actually stunned. So in the air, Rebellion actually does stun them. This obviously changes when they're in DT, so remember when I said it takes 6 shots for them to stun? This is without DT. With DT, it'll take them 30, because when they're in double trigger, in general, and perhaps this is across the board with all enemies, but the defense is magnified by 5. So it multiplies by 5, and these aren't really strong enemies in terms of stun resistance. They're kind of near the bottom of the totem pole. Lust and Sloths, they take 12 shots without DT, and with DT, 12 times 5 is 60, so it'll take them 60 shots to stun. So again, that's another reason to tell you guys that, yeah, these weapons aren't the greatest when it comes to stunning enemies. You're kind of... they become kind of obsolete on DMD. The good thing though is that these weapons are easily cancelable quickly, and I'll get to that in a bit, but in the air, as I already established, it twitches them, but it will never stun. Even if you shoot them 6 times in the air, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it will just react into a twitch instead of a stun. And this is just like a rare property. Most moves will have that ability to stun. Like when these enemies are DT, they'll ignore a rave just like they would react to a normal shot of Ebony and Ivory. But after a certain amount of raves, they will stun again. These though, they will never get that ability. So that's just a little kind of piece of trivia. The same thing when they're on the ground, they don't really stun, but you notice how his legs flop when I hit him with Rebellion. It's kind of important too, because it's harder for them to get up with regular sword slashes. They still, I think they could probably stay in the ground forever if I just shoot them. I'm using my thumb here because I can't shoot very fast, but yeah. Just kind of useless at this point, but let me actually get to the part where I'm probably not gonna... Probably boring some of you guys to death because none of this is really practical, but here's the practical stuff, I guess. From afar, you don't... Let's say you're in Royal Guard. From afar, these is kind of the only sorts of damage. You can do drive, but this is kind of slow. It does hit pretty hard, and it has the ability to do a large amount of crowd control, so it's useful. But besides that, your only other option for damage is kind of gunshots. And you can't use this forever, obviously, because they're not gonna do a lot of damage, especially on the higher difficulties, and they only get you so much style before it starts to ignore it. And that's if you care about style. I don't really care about style, but eventually you want to get up close to the enemy if you really do care about that. So let me think. Yeah, you just want to ultimately get close. It sort of serves as a bridge. If this guy were a Raph, which is one of those exploding guys, you want to stay from afar. And Raphs, if you hit them with a melee attack, they'll kind of like bounce you back, and you can't really do damage to them with melee attack. So, guns are your best option, usually. Obviously, this will take a little bit of time, but you could still explode them. And you want to stay away because, again, they'll explode. You can combine this with Sword Pierce, for example. And Sword Pierce, even though it is a melee attack, I guess, the stabs that happen when they're impaled into the enemy, they will actually damage a Raph. And you can use this in conjunction with Ebony and Ivory. And those stabs don't actually kill the enemy. They deplete the enemy's health, but they don't kill the enemy. They don't have that ability. It's almost like melee stab. The enemy can be as low as it possibly can, and you can be doing as many melee stabs as you can, but it won't kill the enemy until the last hit of melee stab, which actually does kill the enemy. So you'll use Ebony and Ivory to finish him off. You can obviously use shotgun if you're close to, or if you know what you're doing. Like some people can, I think, Royal Guard shotgun. I'm not sure. You can definitely Royal Guard after an Ebony and Ivory shot with Raphs. Which is another like cool thing that people do, especially speedrunners. Speedrunners kind of do that a lot, but that's something that you might want to, use if you're more advanced into that sort of stuff. You can also use these guns because blood gargoyles, I don't know, the red bats, they will turn into stone if you shoot them with a bunch of projectiles. Ebony and Ivory is one of them, and since they can fly around a lot, they can be better than Spiral, which is a projectile, or like Kalinan, which is also a projectile, but it also has... it also comes to an end and it explodes, but this can be useful to stun them, or like to turn them into stone from long range, and then you can actually start hitting them with melee, because if they're not in turned to stone, they will divide and cause a lot of problems. But I think, again, mostly the people who are watching this probably already know this basic stuff, but I kind of want to go over every little thing that I may know so that I can help like newer players. I probably already scared a bunch of newer players away, but don't worry about it. So, those are perhaps some of the uses for Ebony and Ivory. They're not that many, but you can still make some use out of them, and they're definitely not just for some practical purposes. They also can add a lot of flash to your gameplay, and these weapons, as I said before, they are quick shooting, and because they deal a little damage and a little stun, they do have pretty high cancel ability. Like, you can cancel out of them pretty quickly, or like you can do something out of the recovery pretty quickly. They have very little recovery, and so that means that you can be shooting and then, you're safe if you just jump out of the way, right? That's useful. And so whenever you're using Ebony and Ivory, you're pretty much safe. It's really good. So like maybe an enemy is gonna shoot you or like hit you with a melee, and then you can just release or something like that, right? And you don't have to worry about doing like a few of these and then guarding at the last moment, because when you do these, you always run the risk of being in recovery frames and not being able to roll guard. Now my royal guard sucks, as you can tell, but even when that happened, okay. But yeah, that Ebony and Ivory can be kind of useful for, instead of like just standing still and waiting for the guy to hit you, you just shoot a bunch, and you can guard. I don't know. Again, not the best showman for a royal guard out there. But yeah, these this is something that you can use to your disposal to not have like little gaps of awkwardness in between your gameplay. These can be useful to keep you up in the air. I think I already mentioned that, but I'll mention it again. It can be useful to keep you up in the air. Like pops you up a little bit. The first shots, then you start accelerating downwards. Yeah, I think I've already explained that. But that can be useful for more than one way. So as I mentioned before, you can do things out of them pretty quickly, and that means that you can sort of cancel moves into each other over and over and over again, sort of. This is not really the best because Royal Guard kind of does a better job at this. But assuming you didn't have Royal Guard, like something like spamming Stinger over and over again, you'll notice that you always do this first hit of Rebellion, even though you're doing all the inputs correctly. And that's what happens when you know, do Stinger too early, without sort of canceling like this. But you can use Ebony and Ivory shots to speed up the process. But again, if you have Royal Guard, this is a lot better. I'm not even doing it as fast as other people might be doing it. Speedrunners use this a lot as well. So there's always better options for cancelability on the ground. You can still cancel stuff, obviously. The last part of prop is easily canceled by Ebony and Ivory, but you can cancel with pretty much anything like that. Yeah, so it still has some uses, I guess, but in the air it's much more practical. So besides keeping you in the air for a bit, you can sort of do this, right? I'm doing aerial rave, shoot, and repeating that over and over and over and over again. Now this is useful because you can do the same attack repeatedly in the air, and you can sort of combine this. Like you don't if let's say you just want to do raves, the first hit of raves over and over and over again, and you don't want to switch between another weapon to get that first hit of rave, you can just do this with Ebony and Ivory, because again, Ebony and Ivory is pretty quick and you can cancel out of it pretty quickly. And this is good not just for like looking cool, because obviously like if you have this, you get to keep the enemy in the air while you descend, and descending can be useful in some instances. Let's say you just want to launch the enemy before he hits the ground, and you can definitely use this to your advantage. It also helps you to like position yourself during some jump cancels. I'm gonna be talking about Ebony and Ivory jump cancels, but let's say you want to do this, right? You want to do a reverse aerial cross, but then jump cancel and still continue the combo. You can do something like that, right? Where you're doing that for show, kind of. But you kind of want to do that relatively low to the enemy so that the enemy doesn't lose too much height. That's kind of more advanced. I'm going to be talking a little bit more about gun jump cancels and stuff like that, so don't worry about it. But besides like doing cool, like I guess combos and stuff like that, it's useful for efficiency in some instances. So with enemies that are difficult to jump cancel, or enemies that aren't really jump cancelable, so Leviathan as well as Arkham, those bosses don't have a jump cancel hitbox. You can sort of jump cancel on their minions that they spawn, but that can be finicky and a little risky. So Leviathan's hardcore, for example, when you open up the center and he starts doing all those little laser things, in the air you're kind of safe. You can do stuff like aerial rave and this shit over and over again. But if you want to like do a lot of damage, you can do something like aerial cross and that over and over and over again, and you will do damage to the thing pretty quickly. You have better options though, like hammer jump cancels. Not jump cancels, but like if you, instead of aerial cross, you replace it with hammer, you can do a lot of damage with that, as well as the slashes, the style slashes for Navan. So those are some ways in which this property, the ability to sort of like cancel quickly out of Ebony and Ivory, is useful. Yeah, so this is not just for looking flashy, it can have its practical applications. But I mostly use it for flash. It's something that I like, and something that I really, when I first kind of saw people use stuff like this, I didn't really like it too much. But that was mostly for jump cancel, but still, it can be something at your disposal that you want to use. I'm trying to think of anything else. Okay, so when you jump, you can sort of drift towards a direction. Just a little bit. It's kind of hard to show, but you'll notice that Dante kind of drifts backwards. And there's kind of a pseudo-inertia thing in this game where you can drift into a direction with your attacks depending on which way you jumped. So this is neutral jump aerial cross. He kind of has this set movement, but if I jump backwards, you'll go backwards. And this applies to some moves, like if I do aerial cross and aerial rave never, it just stays static, even if you jump backwards. But if you do something like this, even though aerial rave stays static, the aerial cross afterwards doesn't stay static because you jump backwards initially. And Ebony Ivory is kind of similar because not only can it drift kind of slightly backwards, but you can do stuff like you're drifting backwards in this instance, and for certain combos it can be useful. I'm kind of hard to do this without sort of confusing you guys, but just don't worry about it. I'm just gonna try to see if I can find something cool to show off. Like right there. So I kind of got away from him, and the sky starts towards him. But that's kind of better to show off with like DT enemies. This is not really DT enemies, and there's other weapons that are better for that. You can also like side switch with guns like that. And that's something that you like. I used to do this a lot when I was younger. I still kind of try to use it, but I don't do it as much anymore. Also, you'll notice that you don't move too much. If you do a wall jump, it's kind of the same thing. But if you shoot before a wall jump, you get a lot of movement. And this was discovered by 475. This is a really good DMC3 player. And this is going to be something useful that you might want to integrate into maybe some environmental combos. It's very niche, obviously, so these things aren't really things that I expect most players to use, but if you want to use it, it's there. But I can't think of anything else, really. So we'll go ahead and say that that's pretty much the basics for just like shooting Ebony and Ivory. The regular shot. We can go into other stuff. So let's go to free ride. Free ride is something that you use to get around. Free ride is useful for practically one of the most common purposes for free ride is so that let's say there's a bunch of enemies around me and I have this one guy down. I can use free ride to go to safety and isolate one enemy. So this enemy could be an enemy that I find annoying, like maybe a lust. So I just hop on him, isolate him, and start wailing on him while the crowd of enemies like all over down the block. And this can be a really useful tool, but and not only is it does that, but also you can collide with other enemies. And when you collide with them, you can stun them and deal damage to them. It's not that much damage, but it's good to keep enemies away from you. But you can also sort of extend this with Ebony and Ivory. So you'll notice that when I do free ride, I don't really go at the end of the stage, right? But if I do gunshots near the end of the free ride, I will extend the distance I travel. So let me demonstrate that for you guys. I'm gonna do this from this corner, from one side of the stage to another. Whereas before I couldn't really do that. See? one of the trade-offs is that, like, you can see that I am able to control where I'm going at any point in time, but when I start shooting, I am in the set path that I was going right before I shot Ebony. Now, this is useful because not only does it extend the distance, but it also shoots, obviously, and it kind of does a bit of stun, and it can stun enemies around you, so that kind of keeps you a little bit more safer. You can hop off at any time, like a normal free ride. You can sort of just jump and then hop off. Interestingly enough, though, like sometimes you will knock an enemy back in a weird direction, and I think that's just where Dante is facing at the moment of the jump, because you see he spins around and then he jumps back. But he jumps back the opposite way of where you were going, usually. You can also, let's say, maybe you can hop off and shoot, so that you can get into the ground quicker. Oh yeah, there's some other thing. Sometimes enemies get wall splatted like this, right? You notice if I slice him, he instantly goes to the ground. And that can be sometimes useful, because maybe I want to like free ride on him, right? It takes me a while for him to be free ridden, because he's not laying on the ground completely. Now I can free ride him. And you can just shoot Ebony and Ivory to sort of make that wall splat cancel. And I can... this... oh crap. Right? So that's another use for Ebony and Ivory. One other thing too is that you can stop knockback with Ebony and Ivory, but not with these enemies. Like, you see how I knocked him back, and even though I shot, he still flew away from me. Well, there's an exception to this. Most enemies will never actually stop with a stun move afterwards. However, Enigmas, those enemies you can knock back and you can shoot, and they will stop in the tracks in the middle of the air. This is very DMC4 like, and we'll cover DMC4 at a later date, but that can be something interesting to mess around with combos for that game. I mean, for that enemy type. Enigmas are kind of annoying to combo on, though. They're the shooting guys, the ones that shoot a bunch of arrows at you. So that's one other thing that you can probably use Ebony and Ivory for. But that's kind of it for regular shot. Now let's move on to styles. Now in Gunslinger mode, you have this passive ability called Rapid Fire, sort of passive ability. So after shooting a set amount of bullets, you will go into Rapid Fire mode, and this, I think it makes you shoot faster. I'm not entirely sure, but it definitely does more damage and probably does more stun. I'm not entirely sure, but you'll notice the muzzle flash, and then it will just grow. And that's Rapid Fire. Now the problem with this ability is that if I just pause for a little bit, I lose Rapid Fire, and that means that I can't really cancel this into anything. Like, I just go back to normal gunshots, and it's kind of like, it's not really an interesting thing at all. It's not useful. It just does Ebony and Ivory just slightly, ever so slightly better. But not something that is so useful and interesting, so I'll just skip over that. You do get charge shots though. Charge shots actually do that much better. If you hold down the shoot button in Gunslinger, obviously if you're using a style switcher, you can hold it down whatever style you want. But this, not only does it sound nice, not only does it look nice, in my opinion obviously, but it does a lot more damage and a lot more stun. So beforehand it took 6 shots to stun this guy. That was 1 shot. This is equivalent to 12 shots of Ebony and Ivory, so it's the same as this. But this is Ebony and Ivory, and you can spam this pretty quickly. So you get a lot of stun in such a short amount of time compared to just like sword slashes. That can be really useful because you can interrupt enemies even in their DT form pretty quickly. So these guys in DT, it'll take them 3 shots with charge shot to stun. For Lust and Sloths in DT, it'll take them 5, which is still quite a few. Like it's less than it would take this guy to stun without DT with normal shots. So that can be something useful to keep in mind. It also can be used for combo stun launches. Now this is for more advanced players. They might know what I'm talking about at this point, but because they're equivalent to like a Ray, for example. You can do stun launches pretty easily. Like, imagine this was a DT Sloth. You launch the DT Sloth, do 4 shots of charge shot, and then do a high time, and the high time will stun launch. So that can be really useful, and you can combine this with other moves as well. And it's just like a really good way to add a bunch of stun to the enemy and have a combo going. Obviously for like stone, well, for like blood gargoyles, they'll stun them or like turn them into stone a lot faster, and so on and so forth. So those are really good properties for them. They also kind of have some buffering potential, not really that much, but that's something else to keep in mind. There's one issue though. You'll notice that sometimes if you have a long enough pause, you lose all your charge shot. So you kind of have to do this uninterrupted. But there's a way to keep this, and this is also the case for, like, let's say I do aerial cross after a charge shot. I just lost all my charge shot. The same thing for Rave. This is style switcher exclusive attack. Okay, that wasn't the example that I wanted to show. But you see, I lost all my charge shot. But as you noticed, the first attempt that I did that, I actually was able to transfer charge shot. This is because, and I'm not entirely sure of the exact rules because it seems kind of finicky and it's kind of out of my field of knowledge because I'm not really a gunslinger player, but or I don't really even use a style switcher that often. But if you have a gap, so let's say I do this move, right? Or this move. When Dante's kind of putting his sword back, that's kind of the cancelable portion of the animation. But I could cancel that animation with like something else, like a jump or whatever. And I could cancel a little bit later and whatnot. But you basically want to have no gaps in between the moves that you want to be doing. So if you do charge shot, then aerial cross and charge shot, or charge shot, aerial rape, charge shot, let's say. You want to do that. You don't want to have any gap in between both of those moves. You want to do them as tightly as possible. If there's a little gap in between, it seems like your charge shot will blow away. I might be wrong about that, but that seems to be the general rule, and so I can do something like this. It's going to be hard to demonstrate because, again, this is not something that I typically do often. I don't play gunslinger often, but you can definitely transfer. Like I did right there. You can do that a lot more times. You can do it with aerial cross as well. I'm not going to try it with aerial cross because it seems a lot harder with aerial cross. Like that. And this is basically something that can make your combos a lot more versatile. It seems like if you do 2 shots of a charge shot first and then do aerial cross or whatever other move you're going to do it into, it seems to be more consistent. It could just be some buffering stuff, but whatever, right? And it looks sick as fuck, obviously. At least for me. You can also combine this with jump cancels. Again, I'm gonna cover jump cancels in a bit, but here's like an example. Right. So that is useful. It can be pretty versatile. Unfortunately, it's kind of strict in that regard. In DMC4, you don't really have to do that, but it's something to keep in mind if you're going to do more advanced stuff with combos and whatnot. Yeah, it's pretty cool, pretty flashy. Highly recommend you use it if you're using Gunslinger. I'm gonna try to think. Okay, so now we have Wild Stomp. Wild Stomp is a move in which if you shoot Ebony and Ivory while the enemy is down, you do that. And it's a crazy combo. You gotta shoot pretty quickly. You kind of also have to shoot pretty quickly for other reasons as well, because sometimes the enemy will get up during the crazy combo, and that will just cancel your crazy combo. Even though you technically got it, it will just cancel your Wild Stomp. And it's pretty good for finishers, really, and it can also cancel stuff. So, let me try to do this like that. Mixing this with charge shot is a good idea too. Let's say I fall down. It can be pretty cool. There's one thing that I really love about this though, and it is Stinger into Wild Stomp cancel. I think this was found by a player called Mo back in like 2006 or 2007. So this is like freaking big range shit. It's the same guy that I mentioned I think earlier, where he contributed to finding a bunch of stun value stuff. So you can cancel Stinger completely, and that was all trigger finger speed, by the way. And you don't get the knockback part of the thing. So what I'm gonna assume here, this is just a theory, is since you can do Stinger into melee stab, and sometimes you can do it fast enough to where the knockback part of the Stinger doesn't come out. I think that it confuses the game with like melee stab with Wild Stomp, because they're both crazy combos, and so you get something like this. Ah, shit. Huh, I can't do it. It's easier for me to shoot right before. And from a distance, I guess. Wow, I just lost all my abilities, huh? There we go. But it's something sick. I love it. I love it a lot. And whenever I play Gunslinger with Ebony and Ivory, that's something that I definitely try to use a lot. I don't think there's any other move in the game that kind of has that good of a property when it comes to that, so that's kind of unique. So that's kind of wild something. Oh yeah, there's some like nice little glitches. So in the Temperance wagon, you see where you're going to, in that wagon to fight Beowulf. That you do that in that wagon while it's moving, and you kind of get this like sort of glitchy effect where you kind of slide across the thing, and you also get like a bunch of like crazy combo effects where you see the flash whenever I go into the crazy combo state. That flash is just spammed a bunch. I think when I first tried it, or like the second time trying it on PS2, it just crashed the game. So it might not be the most stable thing. I don't know about on PC, but that's something that you might want to mess around with if you are interested in like that sort of cool glitchy stuff. There are some other areas like you kind of go up the elevator to fight a bunch of like gluttony sort of, and in like this sort of gear section. I don't know how to explain it. I think it's mission 5, but there the floor can do also that sort of stuff. It's kind of weird. But yeah, let's actually move on to the style button with Gunslinger with Ebony and Ivory. Let's cover Rainstorm first, okay? So Rainstorm, you press this once, you shoot directly below you, and as you can see, it kind of stuns the enemy a lot. If you mash this, you will extend the Rainstorm by quite a bit. It actually kind of deals a fair bit of damage, I think. I'm not entirely sure. It does some damage. I've noticed the health bar kind of go down a little bit with Hell Vanguard, but I haven't really fought Hell Vanguard in a long time to confirm. But there's something cool that you can do to descend while shooting the enemy that is right below you. You can obviously do this on an airborne enemy as well. You can cancel this with Ebony and Ivory shots. I don't know if you can cancel this with charge shots. But you can definitely cancel stuff like this, and maybe arrow cross. I don't know. You can sort of go nuts with this, but it's not super important. If the enemy is like right next to you, it will just ignore it. So you kind of want to get up close and slightly above the enemy to kind of hit them with this, because it does ignore some of your gunshots. He does ignore some of your gunshots, but if you're like right above him, That won't be too much of an issue. Yeah, especially if extended. And yes, you can use this with other combos as well. Or like with other moves. Let's see. I'm gonna probably do something like that, maybe? You can... There's some delay after the rainstorm that you kind of have to deal with, so... But it is useful. You can combine this with Wild Stomp too, like Wild Stomp canceling. This is another really cool Wild Stomp cancel. This is not what I wanted to show, but... That, all trigger finger by the way, is one of the coolest things to Wild Stomp cancel, I think. It's really fun. You can obviously combine this with a bunch of stuff, right? I was doing 2 sometime right there, so I'll talk about that in a bit. But you can definitely do that in combination with a bunch of stuff like so 2 sometime. I mean, Rainstorm is pretty cool. It's not. I still think that DMC4 Rainstorm is probably the best Rainstorm. I'll get into why that is in like a future video. But I like how it looks and I like how it sounds. Rainstorm in this game is great. I like how it sounds. But obviously there's some issues when it comes to it hitting the enemy sometimes. It's kind of... I don't even want to say it's random, but it does feel kind of random. At least in terms of hitbox. I could be wrong about that. But it is a fun little tool. Now we'll talk about 2 sometime, which is the Sao on the ground. So right now I'm shooting with 2 guns. Like normally you see Dante kind of just shoot with his hands vertically, but you know, he turns into gangsta and starts shooting sideways. Now you can change the direction in which one of your guns go, and this way you can shoot one enemy while shooting another at the same time. Kind of the same time, because you're obviously alternating between Ebony and Ivory, but and you kind of want to shoot like mash very quickly so that you don't have like these awkward gaps in your sort of shooting, because you'll notice how Dante take a step back and forth if you don't shoot quickly. If you shoot quickly, you won't have that much of an issue. And notice how like this would take 6 shots to stun. This guy has insane reflexes. It took 1 shot to stun, so this must be at least 6 points of stun. I don't remember exactly. Now I think I remember somebody saying it was 3. So this might be some like style switcher thing. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure it's not a style switcher thing. Like, look, I stunned him in the air. Like, that's pretty cool. Let me see if I can do that again. Jump, jump, fucking jump, you fucking pussy. Jump, jump. This thing. So yeah, he's not gonna jump. I forgot. There's sometimes ways to sort of exploit their AI. This isn't one of them though. Let's see if I can make him jump here. Yeah, I made him jump. That's a little AI thing. Basically, if you knock an enemy back and he's facing the ground, but his head is towards the wall, he'll jump back towards you. Depending on your spacing, of course. If you're too close, you won't really jump, I think. I don't remember. It's been a while since I actually played this game as much as I used to. I've been playing a lot of DMC5 and taking a handbrake. But okay, I could probably do something with that way. Okay, watch this shit. Watch this shit. Watch this shit. Ah, fuck. Don't worry, guys. Don't worry, guys. I'm not gonna let you all. I'm not gonna let you all down. I promise. I'll do something cool. XD. Fuck. I kind of want to catch him when. Okay, no. Actually, you can actually shoot behind you like this. So look at this shit. I know what I'm gonna do. I know what I'm gonna do. Catch this shit, guys. I'm a pro. I'm a pro. But yeah, this is do some time. does a lot of stun, you can tell. And I'm pretty sure even on DMD they can be somewhat competent to keep enemies away from you, but I'm pretty sure that utility is not going to be too strong on DMD. When enemies are NDT, this thing probably will be ignored. But the good thing is that just like shoot, you can cancel out of it pretty quickly. And in fact, I think you can cancel it before it even comes out. The same thing with every Ivory shot, so it's not super special. But there is one thing really special about this, and it's 2-some-time canceling. Now, 2-some-time canceling, remember when I was doing this shit, right? With normal Ebony and Ivory shot. This is with 2-some-time. A lot faster. This is basically the RG canceling of Gunslinger. This is super great. And it makes sense for this game too. I don't know if this was like an intended thing by the developers, but since you're not having Style Switcher in like the normal version of the game, you can definitely, and I think there I kind of just like canceled 2-some-time before it even came out. But you have cancel ability for 2-some-time. It's great for that, and it's kind of underused, I think. Not many people use this sort of stuff. And I can't really use it as well because my style button is on square and my melee button is on circle, so they're kind of far apart in the controller. So doing cancels, like guard cancels and this sort of stuff, is one of my weak points in this game with melee or like 2-some-time canceling. But it's useful. It's useful, and I do recommend that if you use this, implement it to gameplay. You can obviously, like, even with guns, like I'm alternating between the normal shoot button and 2-some-time. And sure, it looks jank, but I like how it looks. Look at how jank this. I swear, like half of his body is like convulsing. I don't know what to describe, but it's pretty cool. I think I've seen some efficient players do this, maybe to like keep the style meter up. I don't remember, but I've seen it against like I think I've seen it against Cerberus boss battle. No damage runs with Cerberus. I think I've seen this there. But this is really something else. I think you can do this with Charge Shot as well. I'm not entirely sure though. Yeah, you can sort of alternate between Charge Shot and 2-some-time. So that's super cool. There's one thing about Charge Shot too, is that you can charge your guns while doing style moves with every Ivory. So that's another advantage with 2-some-time, that you can still sort of shoot the enemy like you normally would, except with a stronger attack. And then Charge Shot when you can. You can do Rainstorm. Ah shit, I canceled it. I shot too early. Yeah, I shot too early there. You can do that sort of stuff. I was already showing that off a while ago, but that is something to keep in mind. 2-some-time is... I don't use it often, but that's because I don't use the Gunslinger often, but it's really good. 2-some-time canceling. Gunslinger in general in this game is great. Now I'm trying to think of something else to explain, because I think that's pretty much it for the Gunslinger portion, and pretty much Ebony and Ivory in general. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So, something else that we might want to cover is something that I get asked frequently, and I think this is the main reason why people were asking. I got a Curious Cat question, and somebody asked, okay, how do I implement Ebony and Ivory into air gameplay or something like that, or can you make a tutorial? It was something along the lines of, can you link it? Can you make a tutorial about how to use Ebony and Ivory for air combos or something like that? And I've been getting questions about Ebony and Ivory jump cancels for like 2 months already, and so this is probably something that people might want to know about. And so, since me not using jump cancels, I'm just alternating between arrow rave gun, arrow rave gun. But this is me using jump cancels. It looks a bit different, huh? So, I'm doing aerial rave, jump cancel, shoot, aerial rave, jump cancel, shoot, and I'm repeating that ad nauseum. But so it has its uses. So just compare these two. This is without jump cancel, I'm losing height. This is with jump cancel, I'm gaining height, and this is kind of done as tight as possible. One of the reasons I like to do this is because sometimes Dante shoots straight up, not even at the enemy, just like straight up like that. It looks jank, but I like that. I used to think that kind of looks stupid, but now I really enjoy it. Stuff like, you can do this with Helmbreaker, empty Helmbreaker, so I'm gonna jump cancel Helmbreaker before it even hits, and then do Ebony and Ivory repeatedly. If I can do this. So you can do something like that. I used to think that looked stupid, but after a while I just thought, okay, this is pretty damn cool. And some people want to learn about that, and so you basically, it's basically just another jump cancel. You can jump cancel arrow wave a bunch of times. And notice how I'm kind of like parallel to the enemy compared to this, right? You're kind of gaining height. So there's kind of a difference in usage. Like here, I'm keeping the enemy up in the air while I'm descending. The enemy is barely losing height. Here, I'm kind of losing height with the enemy, and if you do it fast enough, you will lose more height than the enemy, right? But you can kind of space yourself to space your jump cancels out. The space between your jump and melee, or rather jump and style, can be spaced apart a little bit, and you can sort of fall with the enemy. And this, if you don't space yourself, you gain height, and this they all have different applications, because a lot of things, one of the things that people don't really realize about Devil May Cry is that people see like, oh, it's just like cool, like really speedy jump cancels. A lot of this game is positioning based, and you want to make the best out of your positioning and do it for certain stylish things. So each thing has its own sort of usage and application, and the reason why you gain height with this is the same reason why I mentioned earlier that you, for the first couple of shots, you kind of gain height. And that, after jump cancel, causes the height gain. This can be kind of annoying though, because if you're doing this as fast as possible, you'll gain too much height at a certain point. One way you can mitigate this is that you can space your inputs out a little bit. So I'm still kind of, I'm still doing a jump cancel. I'm still doing jump and shoot like I would with Rave, so the space between jump and shoot is as tight as possible. But I am doing Rave right after, and the space between my Rave and jump cancel, that's the part that I'm spacing out. And so I can sort of do this repeatedly without gaining too much height. I still kind of gain height. And I lose a little bit more height than I would otherwise, right? I'm still losing height. Compared to this, I got more rays off more quickly, and I gained a bit of height, but the enemy kind of stayed the same, in the same place, same position. But if I space my inputs out, I kind of lose a bit of height, and that can be undesirable to some. It still kind of has its uses, but you can, another thing you can do, and this is something that pretty much every high-level player does, and including myself, it's a very simple way to do this. You combine the version without jump cancels, which causes you to lose height, with the version that has jump cancels, which causes you to gain height. So right now, I'm jump canceling, jump cancel, jump cancel, jump cancel, no jump cancel, no jump cancel, jump cancel, no jump cancel. I can't really show it off, I'm fucking rusty. Jump cancel. No jump cancel, no jump cancel, jump cancel. And so you can do that. You can just adjust your height whenever you want. If you see yourself gaining too much height, you switch to the version that doesn't gain you too much height. You can actually do this. You can actually alternate after every sort of rep, let's say. So this is a jump cancel version. Jump cancel version, no jump cancel version. And then I sort of repeat the process over and over and over again. Right there, I was doing the jump cancel, aerial rave, and then no jump cancel, aerial rave, and then another one that does jump cancel, then another one doesn't. So that's something that you can sort of mess around with. You kind of have to learn how to combine these two things together. But once you get the hang of it, it's easy. Also, like, obviously this is not exclusive to aerial rave, and not exclusive to the first hit of aerial rave. If you do the 2 hits of aerial rave, you can actually stay pretty consistent at the same height of the enemy. And if you do this with aerial skydance, you gain a shit ton of height really quickly. So if you want to gain height really quickly, there's your thing. You can do 3 of these at most, depending on the enemy slots usually. But this can be really useful too if you see yourself kind of losing height to the point where you're starting to do air hikes because you are not close enough to the enemy to jump cancel. Stuff like Ebony and Ivory jump cancels can be useful. Other ways it can be useful is for flashy stuff. So if I jump cancel Helmbreaker a bunch of times, doing it really low relative to the enemy can be a little bit difficult. So I like to gain a little bit of height before I do a bunch of Helmbreakers like these. So that can be another use for it. You can obviously like change stuff so much. Like the thing about Ebony and Ivory is that it shoots out almost instantly. The hit comes out earlier than it would with a rave, I think. And because of this is why Ebony and Ivory jump cancels seem to allow you to do more raves on an enemy than without them. So if I'm doing aerial raves a bunch of times, I'm kind of losing height. But if I do it with Ebony and Ivory, I'm barely losing height. I get to stay in the air for a while. This is because, again, like what I mentioned of the twitch effect, twitch is the enemy, right? And so that sort of fills in the gaps and makes you hit the enemy more frequently at more frequent intervals. And that's one of the uses for Ebony and Ivory jump cancels, not only to look flashy, but also to keep the enemy in the air for a longer period of time. And you can, again, like sometimes you see me jump cancel, right? But sometimes I shoot after I'm done with an attack as well. Like I don't always. Sometimes I jump cancel and shoot, and sometimes I shoot after an attack, and sometimes I combine both of them. This is something that not many players do. A lot of players just like jump cancel and shoot, and kind of use that exclusively. I kind of like to mess both together. Also because it kind of is harder and kind of harder. I don't know if I should say that, but I like it because it looks more complicated, and it is kind of more complicated. But believe me, when you get the hang of these things, it becomes second nature. In fact, it becomes harder to do this sort of stuff and to tell yourself, okay, I want to do this, instead of just like going into auto mode and doing Ebony and Ivory jump cancels. Also, as I mentioned, the twitch, right? Sometimes you will see people do Helmbreakers like this in DT combos. This guy isn't in DT, but you can jump cancel Helmbreaker and not cause the enemy to knock down when they're in DT. But if you do this, right, the enemy will lose a lot of height. If you shoot before doing Helmbreaker, the enemy will lose a lot less height. So I can't demonstrate it right now because I don't have a DT enemy, but believe me, this is why you see players shoot at the peak of their jump and then do Helmbreaker, because it keeps them in the air for a bit. That's another use of that little twitch thing. You see people sound kind of like DT when they jump as well, but that used to be used way back in the past when people didn't really think about using Ebony and Ivory like this. If using Ebony and Ivory like this, it becomes more versatile. So again, this is not a DT enemy, so it doesn't look as good, but it has its uses. And another thing too, like ground jump cancels. It can be really difficult to jump cancel raves like this because after a certain amount of if you try to input rave below a certain height in the air, your input will be eaten. You won't do an aerial rave, even though you press that button. You won't do an aerial rave, and that happens for other attacks as well, like Helmbreaker and aerial cross and all that sort of stuff. Ebony and Ivory, you can sort of do it near the ground, closer, I think. I don't know, but basically, without this means that you kind of have to adjust your height, right? So if I want to do ground jump cancels, I would have to jump cancel and have to space my the space between my jumps and my aerial raves will have to be lengthened a little bit so that I gain a bit of height during the jump cancel. That way I am above the height restriction. And that can be difficult to train. That's something that I kind of don't train as often. But I can do, like I can do some raves like that, and I kind of used to be better at this, but, you know, rustiness. And the same thing happens for like other things like aerial cross, skydance. But remember what I said about Ebony and Ivory gaining you height. This is a use for it. You see, once you learn how to do this, it kind of becomes second nature, right? You can use that instead of like having to consciously delay and adjust your raves after a jump cancel, because you're kind of constantly doing height adjustments here. You can just default to doing this, and even though it looks more complicated, to an extent it's easier because you're not focusing too much on doing some weird delays with your jump cancel. Obviously, if you do this too fast, you will gain too much height, and if you are too low, the rave won't come out. But like right there, you saw me shoot Ebony and Ivory, jump cancel Ebony and Ivory, like that. My rave wasn't coming out, but it didn't matter because I'm still like using Ebony and Ivory, and I still didn't touch the ground. And eventually, I get to do that sort of rave that I want. Now you will gradually gain height, and after a certain amount of height, you'll start doing air hikes like that, and it can be a little bit annoying. So for that, you just like alternate between normal, non-jump cancel Ebony and Ivory raves, and there you go. You can jump cancel stuff, and you can combine this with other moves and like that, right? Jump canceling aerial cross before it even hits, but it's just to look cool. This is super useful for Ebony and Ivory, like ground jump cancels. It's unbelievably useful. And you can do something like you remember this, right? These are empty helm breakers. I'm jump canceling helm breaker before it hits, and then jump canceling it into Ebony and Ivory shot repeatedly. Near the ground, I can't really do that, but if I gain enough height, I can actually do that. I can. Let's see. Let's just do it from this angle. Depending on like what side the enemy is sort of, depending on what side you're doing it from, whether it's his legs or his forehead, or if he's like laying face down or face up, the timing and sort of the hitbox is different. So that's something to keep in mind. But because you're gaining height, right, you can now do a bunch of like jump canceled helm breakers, and that's just, again, just for flash, but that's something that you might want to consider. This is why I really like Ebony and Ivory jump cancels in this game, because they look good, they're pretty versatile, and they're just so satisfying. like even when I'm not doing Ebony and Ivory jump cancels, like to untry and die, it's kind of hard to see whether or not I'm jump canceling or not. It just seems like a mesh of like random moves, but they're all kind of thought of. They're not random. It seems random, it seems like a mess, but it isn't a mess. It can be a mess sometimes, obviously. These are things that you can do kind of dirtily, I guess, but they're not necessarily messy. And to the untrained eye, it can be looking kind of complex, but it's not really that complex. But even like for me, sometimes I can't tell if somebody is not jump canceling or jump canceling or alternating between that. I can't really tell, but I can get a general sense of what the player is doing. I can obviously do this to an extreme. Like I can, right there, I'm doing arrow rave, helm breaker, jump cancel, arrow rave, helm breaker, and I'm jump canceling helm breaker before it even lands. I can add gunshots during this to keep the enemy in the air during that. I can also reverse my helm breaker. It doesn't seem like it, but I'm actually reversing the helm breaker. I'm just jump canceling too early, or relatively early. And I can do it more complex than that. I can do aerial rave, and after the aerial rave I shoot, and then I do Helmbreaker, then I jump cancel, then I shoot, and then repeat the process. This is something that I found from 475. Shit, hold on. Fuck, the rust. I'm not too rusty, I guess, but jeez. And as you see, I'm not losing that much height. It even seems like I'm shooting twice in a row, but I'm not actually shooting twice in a row. I have a Helmbreaker in between those two gunshots. It's just that the Helmbreaker happens really fast. Another use is that obviously I can do this. I'm not hitting the enemy with aerial cross, but I shoot after the reversed aerial cross with Ebony and Ivory, and it stops the enemy faster than it would with aerial rave. Like, let me try to do this, and it's not gonna be as easily noticeable with non-DT'd enemy. In the DT'd enemy, you can see the difference pretty clearly. But like right there, the enemy lost a little bit of height. If I use Ebony and Ivory, he loses a lot less height because Ebony and Ivory comes out quickly enough to sort of stop the enemy. And so this is why this gun is useful when it comes to jump cancels, and I think it's much more useful than in DMC3 or 4 or DMC Devil May Cry in the regards of jump canceling. In those games, Ebony and Ivory can be useful for other things, and it can still look pretty nice in those games. But I really like it in this game. DMC4 though, DMC4 is a pretty close second when it comes to Ebony and Ivory jump cancels and using Ebony and Ivory after certain moves. But that's pretty much it, honestly. I don't think I can explain anything else about Ebony and Ivory in this game that I know much about. I'm pretty sure I missed a spot, and I'm always gonna miss a spot, but I don't even know how long this was. I apologize for wasting y'all's time, but this is basically what you can do with Ebony and Ivory in DMC3. So thanks to that person who asked that really vague question that made me have the urge to explain every little facet of Ebony and Ivory. I'm gonna do this for DMC3, well, I did it for DMC3. I'm gonna do it for DMC4, DMC Devil May Cry, and DMC5. Although maybe DMC5 will be the last one because I need to play that game more to understand it more. It's kind of new, so there's always new things to learn. But yeah, this has been DK. Thanks for watching.